But in the first hour here, a headline in the Australian press causes me to think we need to stretch our imagination. We need to push the boundaries of how we've allowed ourselves to think up to this point. We have put a kind of a little picket fence around ourselves and said, you know, we're not going to think outside this fence. We're going to stay in here where it's comfortable. And I think that we need to step over the fence and look at how far might Donald Trump and his Republican cronies actually go. And if they go as far as I think they're preparing to, how must we respond? The thing that really kind of pushed me over the edge on this, and I wrote a piece for Alternate this morning that is going through the editorial process over there right now, being prepared to go online. So I don't know if it's going to be up in the next hour or the next 5 hours or whatever, but you'll find it eventually. But the thing that pushed me over the top was a piece from the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, also known as ABC. You can find it on the Australian Broadcast, and the Australian Broadcasting Corporation is Australia's equivalent of NPR PBS. Except that ABC is much larger and more ubiquitous than NPR is large and ubiquitous in the radio space. But on the TV space, PBS is this little tiny player. But I've spent a lot of time in Australia. The ABC channel in Australia is like king. It's a major, major force in Australia's media. So this is the headline, and the headline says it all. Donald Trump could be ready to order a strike against Iran, as Australian government figures say. So Trump, according to Australia, according to some sources in Australia, is now actually preparing to strike Iran, like in the next month. In fact, here's the opening paragraph. Senior figures in the Turnbull government have told the ABC that they believe the United States is prepared to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities perhaps as early as next month, and that Australia is poised to help identify possible targets. End of quote. So I think it's time that we imagine all the different possibilities, and I'm just going to present a couple. I would love to hear from you what you think are some of the possibilities in this realm of what Donald Trump may be up to and the Republican Party. And, this is not the first time we've raised this question. How far might Trump go? Right? A week before the election, a week before Trump became president, Tony Schwartz, who wrote Trump's book, Art of the Deal, and spent months following him around, getting to know him, learning all about Donald Trump in ways that probably are more analytical, more in-depth, more knowledgeable than anybody else. I mean, perhaps some of his members of his family are close enough to him that they can see these things, but they're not going to be talking about it. But Tony Schwartz, a week before the election, came right out and said that he thought that Donald Trump was going to do three things if he became president. This is Tony Schwartz before the election. He said if Donald Trump becomes president, number one, he's going to attack the free press. Those have been one of the defining characteristics of Trump's presidency. Number two, he'd compile an enemy list and begin getting revenge on those people he thinks has slighted him. That's already going on. The giant purges from government is throwing people into outer darkness and trashing them and their lives and all this kind of stuff. And number three, Tony Schwartz said that he thought that Donald Trump was going to declare martial law if he became president in order to solidify his power. Schwartz told The Independent, the British newspaper, he said, when I said that, I got a lot of rolling of the eyes from people in the media and other people to whom I was making that case. I think today people really do begin to understand that this is a volatile man with very low self-control. So how would this happen? Well, Andrew Buncombe, the guy who interviewed Schwartz for The Independent back in October of 2016, he writes about his conversation with Schwartz, and he says, asked how Mr. Trump would go about undertaking such a drastic measure, martial law. Schwartz said many of Mr. Trump's supporters are police, members of the border guard force, and members of the right wing, the far right wing of the military and the police departments. This is enough to make you think that Charlottesville was just a dress rehearsal, for the very fine people among the brown shirts, and that maybe our own version of Kristallnacht, you know, where the crazies came out, the hard right, mostly young men with sticks and clubs came out and smashed the windows of Jewish-owned businesses and synagogues. And, you know, that our very own homemade version of Kristallnacht, which I think was kicked off in Charlottesville, may not be far off. For example, consider this kind of thought experiment. In November, the Democrats win the House. Maybe the Senate too. Probably not, but maybe the Senate too. But in November, they win the House. And so now you've got a bunch of Republicans like Devin Nunes who, once the Republicans get control of the House and have the power of the subpoena, which is an incredibly awesome power, once the Democrats get control of the House in January, see, it's now November of 2018, if, let's imagine, they get control of the House in January, they're going to start investigating what the Republicans have been doing. And I believe that many of these Republicans, particularly Devin Nunes and his friends, have been actually committing crimes. And there's been no investigation of this because of the, the Republicans run the House. They won't issue subpoenas on this stuff. So what happens if right after the election, now keep in mind, Mueller is not going to issue an indictment or any more indictments that might have anything to do with Trump or his family beyond the middle, I think, next week. Because there's this 90-day window that would run from the end of the first week of August to the first week of November. I believe that's 90 days. All of August, all of September, all of October. Yes, it's 90 days. The federal law says for 90 days, actually it may be policy, but whatever it is, but for 90 days before an election, you don't indict a candidate. You wait until after the election. So the day after the election, Trump, Don Jr., Jared, Devin Nunes, a bunch of Republicans, they're all indicted by Robert Mueller for obstruction of justice and other actual crimes. What does Trump do? What do the Republicans do? Well, first of all, Trump loves to create crises and then solve them himself. He did this with North Korea, he did it with Obamacare, he did it with DACA. It looks like he's doing it with Iran and with immigration. So what might the crisis be that Donald Trump would want? Well, keep in mind, the Constitution in Article 1, Section 8 explicitly gives Congress the power to put down insurrections. To quote, the actual language in the Constitution is that Congress has the power to, quote, suppress insurrections. Now, you'll recall that the day after Donald Trump was elected president, over 1 million people were in the streets in the United States. Trump might declare an equally large demonstration right after the election that coincides with all these arrests as an insurrection. And the Republicans still controlling Congress might vote to put down that insurrection, to give Trump that power, which, by the way, could include the power of suspending the election of 2020, in which Trump is up for re-election. Now, this is not some weird idea that nobody ever thought of. Back in 2004, during the Bush administration, leading up to the November elections in 2004, the Congressional Research Service, which is the arm of Congress that does investigations, was asked by a number of members of Congress if the president could suspend elections. And their answer was very straightforward. They said, while the executive branch does not currently have this power, it appears that Congress may be able to delegate this power to the executive branch by enacting a statute. So if Heather Heyer was only the first anti-Trump protester to be murdered by white supremacists, and right after the election, dozens or hundreds or thousands of people are being murdered by white supremacists, does the president shut down the country? Does he go into lockdown? Do we go to martial law? Do we suspend elections? See, this was the strategy that Tim McVeigh thought he was playing out. This is basically the storyline of this book, The Turner Diaries, that is well known among white supremacists. That in the Turner Diaries, they blow up a federal facility, sort of like the Oklahoma City building And as a result of that, the president cracks down with gun control. He thought that Bill Clinton would do that. Tim McVeigh thought Bill Clinton would do that. And then all the good, well-armed white people come out of their houses and go out in the streets with their guns and start shooting people of color and Jews and kill them all. And so in the end, the triumphant white race, Protestant race, Christian race, let's say. I don't remember if they killed Catholics or not. But in the end, the triumphant white race rules America again, right? This is what Tim McVeigh thought, he was doing. Then we say, well, what about the courts? Can't the courts stop Trump? Well, actually, that's where the problem gets even much bigger. And I got to hit a break here, so I'll fill you in on the rest of that on the other side of the break, because this whole thing with the courts is where it really gets scary. So stick around. It's 17 and a half minutes past the hour. We'll be back with the rest of my question. What might Trump do? What do you think he might do? How should we respond?